This interview has been conducted for the Queer Lives Oral History Project. My name is Rachel Kelly and the respondent's name is Billy Ferrie. This is the 23rd of May 2024 and the interview is taking place at the Marie Trust in Glasgow. Thank you very much for agreeing to be interviewed for this project, Billy. For the record, would you please confirm your name?
Billy Ferrie.
And would you please state your year of birth, just the year, please?
1960.
And whereabouts were you born?
I was born in the maternity ward at Duke Street Hospital in Denniston.
Okay, and where did you grow up?
Grew up in a place called Camlachie, a Cumley Park place, which is not far from the hospital I was born, and then the family moved to East House.
Okay, and whereabouts do you live now?
I live in the Galton, which is I live in a road that's overlooking Glasgow Green.
We've used the term queer in an attempt to be as inclusive as possible, but we appreciate that not everybody's going to use that term to describe themselves, stroke an aspect of themselves. So is there a term you'd prefer me to use throughout the interview?
The term that I normally identified with was gay, so that's fine.
And do you have any preferred pronouns, please?
Okay.
Would you mind telling me if you've come out as gay?
I have, yes.
And if so, when was this?
So this was 1981 when I came out as gay, because that's when I thought it was then legal to do so. Prior to that, it was illegal.
And had it become legal?
I think it was 1980 or around about 1980-81. So I waited because I knew if I was to come out, potentially I might be criminalised.
Okay, and what was the reaction from your family?
Well, I planned this. I was a student at the time, so I'm 21. So I'm I think I was at college, and I was living in a bed set in the west end of Glasgow. But what I'd do is every Sunday I'd go to my parents' place in East House and have Sunday dinner. So I'd planned this coming out event for that. So prior to getting my dinner, I was helping my mother with the laundry. She was out in the back court, so taking sheets off the line. So I was helping her fold things up and take them upstairs to the flat. So I was, out pumping away and stuff like that, because this is a big announcement. So we're in the bedroom folding up things and stuff, and it's almost a cliche, but I said, there's something I need to tell you. And her reaction was, what? She's very much a kind of concerned mother, concerned mammy. So anything, any problems or issues, she'd be very sort of hyper alert. And I said, I'm gay. And she just looked at me, and then she went, oh God, I thought you were going to say you were immigrating or going away or something like that. I went, no. She went, okay. So there was a bit of a pause, and then she said, look, don't tell your father, let me do that, and we'll see how things go when you come back next week. So that was the kind of extent of it.
And what happened when your mum told your dad then?
He was not very happy. So I was kind of dreading going back next week, the following Sunday. So I went, and I was in the living room with my dad. He was kind of watching TV as he normally would do before we had dinner. So there was this long silence, and he wouldn't even look at me. He'd be watching TV, and I was on he was sitting where I'm sitting, say, and I was on a sofa over here, and the TV was there, and he essentially sort of said, your ma's told me the news, and he was very his tone was very serious in his voice, and he says, "Have you told anybody?" I said, "Well, I've told my ma, and obviously, yeah." "No, have you told any of the neighbours or anything?" I said, "No. Do you think you'd see a doctor?" And I was just kind of dumbfounded at this kind of reaction. I knew he wouldn't be happy, but I wasn't expecting. First of all, he seemed like he was more concerned about him and his reputation and his street cred. And also, he obviously didn't feel, he felt it was an illness that I should seek out sort of help with. So I was a bit disappointed, but also relieved in a way that it was out, so I can get on with my life, which was always on hold until that moment, really, of coming out. So yeah, took probably a few years before my dad sort of came round to accepting the news.
And what do you think were the factors in him accepting it?
Probably he became a grandfather, so that may have been one of his concerns about sort of grandchildren and all that kind of thing. So I think for him, he wouldn't have lived his life, or it wouldn't have been as complete without being a grandfather. But my sister, God bless her, she provided the grandchildren for him.
And how about coming out to friends?
Well, there was at the time, just to go backtrack a little bit, because of my kind of, when I first kind of was aware of gay feelings when I was younger, but I dismissed it, and I kind of, it was still persisting, so I was going to the library in Easterhouse to get books out on things, to try and figure out what's this all. So I was so confused, I didn't know what was going on. So I didn't really tell anyone, but I had these had no one really to talk to, because in the way I was brought up, at Easterhouse, typical working class housing estate scheme, you could not be a proof and survive in Easterhouse. So it was very difficult to find support and talk to anyone about it. So I kept this within me, trying to resolve it in some way. So I read about things and stuff like that, and I even got depressed to a point where I was trying to get some look at books on depression, and this is all because I think I couldn't talk to anyone about this or make sense of it. So I didn't really talk to anyone until I joined this sort of I was going through a period. All this led to me kind of exploring the meaning of life and all that kind of stuff. So I tried various things like meditation. There's a kind of Buddhist centre in Glasgow that offered meditation courses and classes. So I went along to that again to try and find answers to things. And there was a thing called the Theosophical Society in the West End, or Queen's Crescent I think it was. And again, I was looking for a philosophy or some kind of framework that made sense to me. So I also became part of a kind of small religious community called the Baha'i Faith. And they it's a very small community, sort of an offshoot of Islam, let's say, just to simplify it. It's a bit more complicated than that, but essentially that's it. And there's a small community, and they took me in, and I felt I belonged and not judged, and I felt accepted. So I was still 21 or whatever, I was part of that community, but realising I'm being incongruent with who my true self is in terms of my kind of sexual orientation and all of that stuff. So I came to the conclusion I had to come out again to this community, and they have conservative views on this kind of thing. So I had to leave that community. I think the philosophy was, or the kind of narrative was, you would be accepted, but as long as you didn't practice. So as long as you didn't be physical with anyone, you'd be part of the community still. And I felt, no, this is not enough. This is, to not be able to be affectionate or touch someone, or be physical with someone, it's a very cruel kind of thing to ask of someone. So I left that community. So I came out to them, left them, and I was interested. There wasn't any kind of follow-up. I hope you're okay, Billy, or anything like that. I just told cut off. Yeah, and there was only sort of, again, this quest for trying to get meaning or trying to make sense of all this. I did a course. I went to Glasgow College of Technology to do a course in social sciences, a BA social science degree course. And there I studied psychology, individual psychology, social psychology, politics and all the rest of it. But that allowed me to develop the kind of intellectual tools to make sense of what was going on for me. And also it was an opportunity to meet other gay people. There was a gay SOC, a gay society. And so that was a great blessing that I managed to find people like me. I wasn't the only one in the world, which I did believe, living in these areas and so on. You just think there's no way you can talk about this stuff, and even though you might suspect other people might be gay, you can never really venture the conversation like that. So at Glasgow Tech at the time, I met other gay people, and everything took off after that. This cloud that was kind of pressing down on me, and it lifted. I could breathe, and I could be me at last.
Have you faced any barriers in the workplace or your career due to being gay?
I can't say. I can't. I may. I've put in that. One of the things I did, to Glasgow Tech doing the course, was I did volunteering work. So part of that was because I'd experienced that wonderful kind of release and freedom, I wanted to help others. So there was a opportunity to volunteer for the Strathclyde Lesbian Gay Switchboard, or Strathclyde Gay Lesbian, and depends how you pronounce it. It could either be slags or scals, and it depended on who you were talking to, which term you'd use. So I was a volunteer for them for about 3 or 4 years, and when I was applying for jobs thereafter, I was using that volunteering experience. So I was writing that down on the job application or the CV. But I'm not sure if sharing that information put me in a place where I potentially could have been prejudiced. Maybe the potential employer thought, maybe not for this person. I don't know. I can't really say. I certainly applied for jobs and got knockbacks, but then I could be anything. So I can't really say I'm aware of any kind of discrimination or issue about employment.
And how about when you were in jobs?
Not again, because I was fairly open about things. So that was, employers or potential employers could filter me out if they didn't want me. So the people who did take me on, obviously knew I was gay, and so it wasn't an issue for them.
Do you think the experience of being gay has changed over time in terms of acceptance or otherwise?
Even generally in society? Yes, I think since my time it's certainly changed. I think it's a lot easier, especially for younger generations, to come out, or even just not come out, but just explore in a way. They have the freedom to explore and not necessarily identify as anything. They just go through a process. I think that's a lot easier with my time. You can you weren't really encouraged, or you couldn't do that. So I think it's a lot easier. And sometimes I get frustrated with younger people who don't realise the kind of privileged place they're in, because it's a lot harder for those of us before.
So what do you become frustrated about?
I think it's just the lack of appreciation of how difficult it was before. And also the kind of lack of interest. I'm not that particularly interested in the older generation gay folk. It's not really part of their, understandably part of their world. But I think, I certainly stand on the shoulders of others. But I don't think the younger generation necessarily believe that or appreciate that.
Do you think that you appreciated that or otherwise when you were younger?
Yeah, when I started doing the course at college, obviously you're researching, you're studying, so you become aware of things, aware of how difficult it was in the 50s and so on. Some of the venues, gay venues, which had been in Glasgow, have been around for years and years and years. And when I went to them, you'd hear stories, you'd talk to older people there, and you'd hear stories of what it was like in the 40s even, or the 50s. And you experience, and you appreciate, what people went through. People being arrested, people being set up, blackmailed, killed even, all that kind of violence, just because of, who they were. So I think for me there's an appreciation of, there's a whole generation before me that suffered far more than I have, but because of them, I can enjoy a better quality of existence than they did.
When you were in your 20s, did you feel safe walking around Glasgow, going into gay pubs or what were known to be gay pubs?
It depends which part of the city and which venues you were going to. So for example, the first ever gay pub I went to, I was taken in by a college friend. It was called the Vintners on Clyde Street. So it's at the bottom of Jamaica Street, Clyde Street. I think there's like a student hostel or something there now. So in terms of feeling safe, if you were in the locality of those venues, you felt relatively safe. But certainly when I came out, I was hyper alert to any kind of dodgy characters, or say groups of guys or whatever, a gang of guys just in the street and being rowdy and stuff, because you didn't want to get their attention. But there was ways of coping with stuff, as usual. So in terms of gay people, humour's quite a useful kind of strategy. But if I was with friends and we're going to say the Vintners or another bar in town, and say one of us was let's say a wee bit flamboyant, okay, then there was a code word we used, and it was called buffs, BUFFS. If we felt there was potentially going to be an issue, and buffs meant butch up for fuck's sake. So if there was a situation where the potential there could be an interaction, an unpleasant one, then that would be the code word, and of course we'd come down and look down to the ground and walk past the potentially offending group.
How would you say, in terms of acceptance, Glasgow was in general in your 20s, like going out and about?
certainly within the student population, there was more of a kind of liberal, progressive kind of attitudes. And you sort of Glasgow middle class, I guess, were a bit more progressive, and a lot of them are old hippies anyway. But I think in terms of the kind of working class culture, there was definitely a kind of resistance to any of that stuff. And that's all tied up with, ideas of masculinity and all that kind of thing as well. Certainly in Easter House, as I referred to earlier, there was a kind of, it was difficult for me to be in that environment because it was very, very oppressive in terms of, never mind sexual orientation, but just your gender as a man and how to be a man. I mean, if you were sitting and you crossed your legs, you were up. There was all that kind of sort of stuff that went on, and that was all very oppressive, and certainly in encountering sort of people from Easter House or my peers or from the other estates or other working class areas, there was that kind of pervasive kind of toxic sort of attitude.
Okay, so socialising. How did you socialise as a gay person in your youth?
Well, I don't know if I'd be a youth at 21, but there's that. So as I said, there was the initial pubs. The Vintners was one. There was a Duke of Wellington in the Girl Street, which is on a corner. She's been there for donkeys. And there was the more kind of trendy bars that younger folk went to. So in the Duke of Wellington and the Waterloo, Duke of Wellington was another one, next to the Waterloo and Vintners. These were kind of older males. Very few females at the time as well, but mostly males. So these were kind of gay men's pubs. Oh, the Waterloo is a fascinating place as well. There's all sorts of weird and wonderful folk in there. But there's there's one called Austin's on Hope Street, Squires, West Campbell Street, which I actually worked in part-time. So as a student, I was earning some income as a part-time barman in Squires. There was the clubs like Bennett's in Glasgow Street, Club X, and various other places which have started off, lasted about a year or two and then closed down. So there was always various venues opening and closing. But essentially I would socialise in pubs. Pubs were a kind of safe environment. You'd really be out in the streets being gay. It's all kind of indoors.
Okay, and has this changed as you got older?
As I've got older, well, I'm now 64, so the kind of need or desire to go to pubs and get drunk and all that kind of stuff, or go to clubs, is less so. Now and again I go to gay pubs, but I'm more likely to be in just an ordinary pub in the city centre. I don't feel a kind of need to be in a sort of gay space anymore than I used to be. Occasionally I'll go to a club. At the beginning of the year I went to a gay club. But sometimes when you get old, sort of just sitting at home with a wee glass of red wine, watching the telly is ideal.
How about in the 90s? Was there any change in the 90s, would you say? Or not?
In what respect?
In the
social scene?
Nightlife, yeah.
As I say, there was sort of various venues coming and going, catering for the gay market. But Bennett's was kind of the major kind of club venue, and because it's in the city centre, you could go to the gay pubs, then Bennett's afterwards. And also when I finished up in Squires, part-time job as a barman, you'd get free entry into Bennett's. And that was an interesting time. There's in terms of the gay scene, that go through various phases of fashion and so on, and looks. So there was a time there was the clones look, which was usually Levi's, DMs, check shirt, a little moustache. You might have a flat top hairstyle, and that kind of that was a kind of fashion for a few years. And I can remember sort of being in Bennett's and all these guys all essentially looked the same. And at that time, Jimmy Somerville was based in Glasgow, and he would go to Bennett's all the time. And Jimmy Somerville had a wee kind of cute wee dance routine. So you used to see him there, and he was a clone as well at the time. So there was certainly wonderful experiences socialising in Glasgow in the 90s. And you had all the kind of music scene as well happening, 90s music. So it was a wonderful time.
So you mentioned that, certainly mentioned a couple of venues were mainly gay men. Was there any lesbian bars to your knowledge?
No, not that I'm aware of. There might have been a section of a bar that would be sort of allocated to women as a safe space for women to sit. And generally I think there was a kind of good sort of interaction, because women felt safe with gay men because they wouldn't get any hassle. So there was that kind of nice sort of interaction. But generally I think there was probably one gay lesbian bar, I can't remember which one it was, or there may have been lesbian nights. So there'd be a gay bar, but it'd have a delegated night for women.
And you mentioned the Waterloo bar and the characters in there. Can you expand a little bit on that, please?
The Waterloo bar was kind of, as I say, it's been there for a long, long time. Years ago, I can remember someone started saying the kind of sailors in the Brimelaw, you know, when they were docking the boats and stuff, some of the sailors would come to the Waterloo to drink and also to potentially pick up. And also at the time it was a kind of famous red wine district, that area. So the Waterloo would have sex workers or prostitutes at the time. There'd be married men going there. There'd be homosexual men going there. So there'd be all sorts of weird and wonderful people that would go there. And the married men, of course, they wouldn't talk about what they got up to, but that was a place to go to if you wanted potentially to have a quickie with someone before you go home to the wife and the weans. And also there was, at the time I was going there was a lady, I don't know the term to use, but she was called Betty Hutton. And Betty Hutton was like a compere, so she would speak like a hostess and just welcome people and go around chatting to the patrons of the Waterloo. And as far as I'm aware, Betty Hutton was an extremely intelligent man. I think he spoke several languages and so on. He was also an alcoholic, but he was such a character. So he was essentially kind of the main star of the Waterloo, and especially at the weekends when it was really busy. So I remember him doing his stuff. I'm trying to think of an equivalence of today, but I can't think. Like a drag artist, and very wicked and very cruel, with a sense of humour. So if you know, there'd be comments about your dress and what you were wearing and all that sort of thing, or your preference in the bedroom. So there'd be all sorts of little barbed comments, but it was all done in good taste. So there'd be lots of weird and wonderful people going to the Waterloo for all sorts of reasons.
And was there any other drag queens that you knew of in Glasgow at the time?
Not really, because I think there were certainly men who were effeminate, but I think to be a drag queen or dress up drag in those days, would be like a big sign saying, "Come and beat me up." So there wasn't many people who were out in drag. Occasionally there'd be a brave soul going into one of the pubs, or bringing their stuff, going into the toilets and changing. But there wasn't drag queens as such.
And how about if you went to other cities in the UK, was the nightlife different or the same in Glasgow?
Well, I travelled to London and Manchester, Newcastle, and they have the kind of gay scenes. So usually a few venues, usually in the city centre, sometimes further out. But it'd be more or less a kind of replication of what you had in Glasgow, except London would be bigger. Then the thing about London was, because of so many venues, there was a kind of delightful anonymity about going to London, and a lot of people did, because the scenes were kind of small in cities like Glasgow and Edinburgh and Manchester. You get fairly well known, your face is well kent, and that could be a disadvantage. So you'd go to places like London where no one really knew you, and you could do what you wanted to do there. But London was probably the more diverse in terms of venues and clubs and pubs and things.
Moving on to elder care. Do you think about the future as you age?
Yes. What I say, I'm getting on. I'm a pensioner now. I haven't got a state pension yet. That's in 2 years' time. But I'm aware of as you get older, you do start to notice things in terms of your health. Things not quite working the way they should. So that does sort of prompt your thoughts about the future and healthcare. But I can remember years ago I used to live in London, and a friend was talking about potentially, wouldn't it be great if there was a LGBT plus residential care home where people would come together and they'd feel safe, and that particularly needs to be cared for and all that kind of stuff. And part of me sort of understood where he was coming from, but part of me was horrified as well. That'd be like, not ghettoised, but I just wouldn't feel kind of comfortable, because there'd be all sorts of assumptions made about you as a gay person and what you value and what's important to you. And gay people, for me, the gay community even, is not a homogenous group. The gay community, so-called gay community, is merely a reflection of the wider community. So you've got people with all sorts of values and attitudes, some quite extreme, some quite conservative, and others quite liberal and so on. So you've got a whole spectrum of people. And for me, as I've grown older, I don't think I would necessarily want to be part of that, or be in a residential care home for gay people. I would be quite happy to have a kind of personal care assistant come to my home, look after me, and I can choose. I'm in control then, and I can choose who I want to associate with or get support from. I used to, when I was in London, I used to work for a charity. I was a call centre manager for an organisation called Jewish Care, and it was a social work service, and essentially it dealt with kind of residential care homes for the Jewish community in London. And some of the horror stories I would hear about was people's attitudes in the care homes towards other minorities. For example, there's a lot of racism in Jewish care homes. So if say a care assistant who was black was there, there'd be all sorts of uninhibited comments from the residents, things like that, and that's all very hushed, obviously. But the idea of being in a care home as an elderly person, not necessarily I was senile or whatever, but I'd be running away from that.
what are your hopes for the future in terms of gay rights legislation in Scotland?
I think there's been major advances in terms of equality and rights for people. And I hope, but things change. I mean, there's a whole transgender kind of issue at the moment. So I hope the rights, the government policies and so on will evolve as communities evolve, as people evolve. I mean, for me, at my particular time in life, I have came out, I have done the gay lifestyle, I've achieved lots of things, and experienced loving relationships and all that kind of stuff. I'm now in my autumn years, and I'm fairly well kind of settled. I don't necessarily need a gay lifestyle as such. For me, I'm kind of integrated. So in a way, I've achieved a lot of the things people were fighting for very early on, or aspired to or hoped for. So I'd hope that was maintained for my generation and the next generations. So for me, the future is more of an integrated sort of society where it doesn't really matter about your sexual orientation or whatever. You just see people for who they are, another human being who's unique. The universe has brought people into the world for the reason, I think, and that's to become themselves, the unique selves. Sexual orientation or gender is just part of it, just part of who you are. It's not all of you. So hopefully in society that'll become more and more prevalent, that we're all human beings with their fallibilities and all that kind of, and hopes and aspirations and not so good qualities. We're all trying to make sense of what it's all about. But it helps when we recognise that in each other and can support each other to become who we're meant to become.
Okay then, Billy, that's all my questions. Have I missed anything at the moment that you'd like to add?
No, I think that you could do lots of these interviews. There's so many different layers and there's so many pathways you could go to explore. But I think that was a good kind of overview of certainly my experience as a gay person.
Okay, thank you very much, Billy, for coming in and for sharing your memories. It's been a privilege to listen to them.
You're welcome.